This is Mile High.
Do I want to tell the story or do I want to show the message?
You've got a lot of work to do between Mile High.
The time has come where we can know
we have a responsibility, an ethical and moral responsibility.
We have to do it better in order to move people along.
Up, down, inside out.
If you get your mind right, it is not. It is a receiver of thought. Because love is my first technique.
It's now time for the show.
Welcome to the Mile High Podcast. This is your host, Dr. Daniel Knowles. Thank you for joining us from wherever you are joining us around the world. Make sure you never miss any Mile High tick and hit subscribe, whether you're watching or listening to this on YouTube or iTunes or whatever channel it might be, Stitcher, Facebook, etc. We always want you to be in the know with chiropractic philosophy, values, vision, and certainly make sure you have dialed into your calendar to be on Higher Ground, August 20th to 23rd, 2020 at Mile High. You can get all the information at milehigh2020.com. We look forward to seeing you there. Today, I am so super thrilled to have as a guest on the podcast for the first time, Sara Farrant. She wowed people on the Mile High Virtual Philosophy Summit, which people loved. We had so much great feedback that we said, oh, let's definitely do a podcast episode with her. And so we're grateful to have her here with us today from the other side of the world. New Zealand does have mountains and water, as sea level and mountain level, or whatever height it would be. I don't know if it's mile high, whatever it is. And is a power graduate and has written two powerful books, The Vital Truth and Health Illusions. Thank you for joining us today, Dr. Sara Farrant.
Thanks, Danny. Thank you for having me, and I'm looking forward to sharing with everyone. It's going to be great.
Well, people really enjoyed you on the Philosophy Summit. We had lots of great feedback.
Thank you.
I understand you enjoyed the Philosophy Summit as well.
Yes, it was great. And as I was sharing before, we came, live on this, that we had practice members that had signed up, and they absolutely loved it. So I think it was great that it was open to not only chiropractors, but really to anyone. And hopefully other people had their practice members listen in as well, because it was invaluable. Well done.
Well, and as you thank you. And as you know, and I know, we call it chiropractic philosophy, but it's really philosophy of life. And values that everybody should be learn more about. Is welcome to learn. So we're grateful to do that. And you've done that so well with your books, publications, and efforts and energy, which we so value and appreciate. And so, first of all, we often talk about how we found our way to chiropractic, and actually, I would like to do that briefly. So people that maybe did not catch you on the Philosophy Summit can briefly get to know you. How did you find your way into chiropractic?
Great first question. I was raised very much in an allopathic household. My dad was not a medical doctor, but certainly his cousins and family and grandparents and were in that medical field. And at the age of about 4 or 5, Danny, there was a late breaking news report on TV that we sat down with mum and dad. We had a black and white TV. And my sister, my mum and my dad, we sat down and we watched this late breaking news. And it was a surgeon who was giving a presentation about the first brain surgery that he had performed. And I sat there literally like this, jaw dropped, like, how can you open up someone's skull and look inside and still have them alive the next day? And from that day forth, I became fascinated with the human body and what its ability was. At the age of 5, I got off the couch, walked to the dinner table and looked up at my dad and I said, you know what? One day I'm going to be a brain surgeon. And he did the standard father thing, right? Pat you on the back like, oh, that's lovely, dear. And off we went and had dinner. But I never lost track of this thought of wanting to be a brain surgeon. And when I went to school, I was called like the dunce in the playground. I was called dumb. I was called, dyslexic. That would be the name that probably would have been given to me. And I used to go to this lady, Miss Claire, on the other side of this oval. She had a little brown door, and I used to go to her for my remedial math and my remedial English, etc. But she recognized something inside of me, that I had this ability to see systems and see things that people couldn't see necessarily. And every time I would walk to her door, Danny, my left foot would hit the grass, and I would say to myself, I'm going to be a doctor and change people's lives. I'm going to be a doctor and change people's lives. For the whole of my school life going to Miss Claire. So I was confirming to myself and to the universe that that was the path I was going to take, regardless of how long it was going to take. I was going to do that. And then at the age of 7, I was in a, cut to just briefly, which was a major turning point for me as well. My dad and I were in, the whole family, we were in the car, we were driving to our family farm, or my grandparents' farm, and Dad was tired and he decided to stop. And my mum and my sister went off to try and find food for us, and my dad and I were unpacking the car. And as all young kids do at the age of 7, when you go to a hotel room, you jump on the beds, you look in the bathrooms, you open up all the drawers, you find everything, and I found a book. And I sat on the bed and I opened this book, a book I had never seen before. It looked completely different to any book that I had ever seen. It had lines in the middle and it had numbers in it. And my dad brought in some suitcases and he put it down on the side of the bed, and he looked at me and he said, Sarah, close the book and put it back in the drawer. And I looked at him like, what? And he said it with absolute certainty. He put the cases down, he moved towards me and he said, close the book, put it back in the drawer. So I did what I was told. I closed the book and I put it back in the drawer. I'm sitting on the side of the bed, and then my dad came over and he knelt down in front of me and he placed his hand over my heart. And he said, Sarah, you have all the answers inside of you. All you have to do is ask the question and trust your answer. Boom. Life changed. Cut to at the age of 10, when my mum was making some cookies in the kitchen and I coughed a couple of times because I was interested in what she was putting together. Well, the beater went off. She grabbed a blanket out of the cupboard, wrapped me up, put me in the car and took me up to my uncle, who was our family medical doctor. And we had family privileges. We got seen to straight away. He asked me a few questions, of which I said yes, no, maybe, sometimes not really. He then, from that knowledge, wrote a prescription. We got back in the car. Mum said, let's go and get the prescription fulfilled at our other family friends who own the pharmacy. And we went down to the pharmacy. I sat in the car. Mum got the prescription fulfilled. And I looked out the window and I was transported, Danny, back to that age of 7. And I asked that question, what do I want to do? And the answer that came back was rest. And so I went home, and Mum, as all parents I would imagine who grew up in an allopathic household, had these 10 famous words spoken to them. Mum popped the pill, glass of water, slid it across the bench and said, there you go, darling, this will make you feel better. And I looked at her and I went, no thanks. But at that same time when I said no thanks and went round to my bedroom and rested, a new girl had started at school, and her name was Kate. And she had a mum who was a nurse, and that nurse was of a different variety. She was into vitamins and minerals and things of that nature. And so I went to Kate's house, and I used to love chatting to her mum because they had these things that rattled in the fridge, but they weren't medications like we had in ours. They were vitamins. So I started going on this alternative pathway. I was making my way out of this allopathic approach at the age of 10, saying no to medications to my parents, and then getting on this bandwagon of alternative. Cut to into my early 20s, 2 chiropractors, husband and wife team came into our life, and it changed my life. I then went out to La Trobe University, where I'd studied psychology, and I printed everything off from Palmer College, because that our chiropractor said, you go to Palmer College because that's where it started and that's where the philosophy is. We said, okay, this is in the 90s. And I printed everything off. I went out to the quadrangle and I sat there and I cried my eyes out, Danny, cried my eyes out, because it said, click here for the Doctor of Chiropractic program. It spoke about innate intelligence. It spoke about universal intelligence. It spoke about the definition of health. And I went, there I am. There I am as the brain surgeon. There I am as this doctor who's going to change people's lives. And I went home and I whacked this wad of paper on the kitchen bench to my husband and said, I'm going to America to study chiropractic. Don't know how I'm going to get there. I just got to go. I said, you can come with me. We can get divorced, or we can have a long-distance relationship, but we all know how they work out. Anyway, 2.5 months later, we were both living there. We'd sold everything that we owned down to a couple of cardboard boxes, and we went. And we didn't look back. You know, we received scholarships, etc. So that's kind of my journey as to how I got there. I had a vision. I didn't lose it. I stayed with what I knew and what I wanted. But one of the interesting things about going into chiropractic college, Danny, I think there are times in our life where we really get pushed. Like one of those now might be the COVID for some people. For me, it was birth. So here I was at Palmer College studying the innate intelligence and the how amazing our human body is. But at pregnancy, I was pushed to trust that. And at no other time in your life, I think, do you get pushed when you are at a pregnancy stage or maybe at a pandemic like there is that's going on at the moment. And as a result of that, I didn't trust my body. We had Amish midwives who were absolutely gorgeous. And we used to go out to their place and talk about whatever we wanted to with pregnancy. And I shared one time that I didn't trust my body to birth. And I blurted out and I cried my eyes out. And as a result of that, I then created a miscarriage. And we miscarried with twins. But that taught me how amazing the body actually is. That was at 14 weeks, how incredible our body is. So I actually got to experience birth. That was the gift that miscarriage gave me. We went on to have 3 extraordinary home births, some with midwives, some without midwives, the last of which was a breech birth. But it brings me to this conversation to have around trust. What does trust look like for you? Why, when we're so pushed, do we fall back to that which we may have been raised with, and we forget what our new knowledge is and our new set of pieces that we put together for health kind of falls away, and we revert back to what it is. So that I call that our family health recipe. You know, what was it that was put together? What were your ingredients put together with health? And a lot of the times that is from a feeling perspective. If you feel something, then we've got to go to someone to take something away in order to have you feel better, because in some instance your body must have got that wrong. So for me, being raised in the allopathic approach, and then I moved into that alternative health approach, but it wasn't until July 2011 when I think I shared this on the philosophy forum. I can't quite remember, but I spoke about, or maybe I didn't, the nanny that we had in our life who called child services on us. And we had lost the rights to our children. And as a result of that, I wanted to be able to organize, systemize the lane very clearly so it becomes irrefutable where chiropractic sits. And it sits along with trust. Given that the allopathic is about fear, we are the antithesis of that. And I didn't want chiropractic to sit in this alternative bucket, because that's not what we are. You know, at the moment here in New Zealand, in the current climate, we are being relegated English, to this alternative bucket. And I want to make sure that we are constantly seen as being separate and distinct. That's been my mission for the last almost 20 years, to kind of separate us out. I remember, Danny, when I was at Palmer College, and it was in the 1990s, and my husband and I had both received the largest endowed scholarship in chiropractic, the Vote Leadership Society. And as a result of that came with, privileges, but also things that we had to do around the campus, which we loved doing. Anyway, the marketing department had come up to me, Laurie Leipold was her name, and she had come up to me and she said, "Sarah, at Lyceum, would you be okay to do an interview?" And I said, "Sure, who am I interviewing?" And because I knew they didn't want to interview me, I was like, who was I going to be interviewing? She said, "Oh, we want to have you interview the philosophy, 4 philosophy greats." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, cool." Because I knew that I loved philosophy. I loved talking about it, understanding it, exploring it. And so anyway, Lyceum came around and I was to interview these 4 greats. Now it was Fred Barge, Reggie Gold, Victor Strang, and David Koch. Wow. Who were on the stage. I'm on the stage on my own. I'm at Lyceum, in Lyceum Hall at Palmer College. I don't know if you've been there. It fits thousands of people in the audience, and it was full. So Laurie Leipold's come over to me and she said, Sarah, here's the brief. Here's all the questions. And I whispered to her, because the session that was on stage was about to finish, and I said, is it okay if I ask a question of my own? And she went, no, you can't go off brief. And I was like, oh, okay. So we went on stage. The four greats were sitting there. I'm sitting there. Time's ticking. Laurie's doing that. Got to wrap up the questions. We've got the next, segment coming on for Lyceum. And I'm like, okay. And then I just, honestly, I sat there and I don't know whether I closed my eyes or whatever, but I just censored myself and it's like, it's now or never, Sarah. It's now or never. And I dug deep and they said, last question, we're about to close. And then I went, oh, actually, there's one more question. Everyone was silent. And I said, I just want to ask this question. And the guys were listening intently because it wasn't on the brief. And I said, do you think that subluxations are of benefit for the evolution of mankind? Wow. There was pause like you wouldn't believe. And then in the audience, Danny, boo, boo, boo. Well, I felt like I just wanted to hide in a hole. Like it was boo, boo, boo. I had people chasing me after that, wondering why I had asked such a question. Because up until then, the subluxation was all about, you've got to remove it from the body. You've got to, we remove it so sick people can get well. You get it, you don't create it. It was all about that understanding. And I wanted to break that shell. I wanted to nudge the needle to say, if we are consistently creating subluxations within our bodies, then there must be some benefit to us. It can't all be bad. There has to be. What was that?
How did they answer?
Well, Fred Barge was the first to answer. And I think Reggie said I was harebrained, even though Reggie and I had a great relationship and we spoke on many occasions. But Fred Barge was the one that said, I believe that you are onto something. And then he said, and he looked at his colleagues and he said, I believe there needs to be some timely deaths in order for the philosophy to advance. Now, he died only a few years later. So it was a very interesting time, but all things have their place, all things have their time. But what is generated out of that, for me, was the illusions that we live by that then box us into following indoctrinated systems.
Right.
So my dad raised me, Danny, to say, look at what everybody else is doing and run like hell in the opposite direction. That's why I asked that question. If everyone is saying that the subluxation is this, that, and the other, what if I say there must be some benefit for the evolution of mankind? It's not a revolution that we live in. I never want my body to be in a revolution. It's not what it is. It's an evolution that we go up and up and up and up as the layers peel away. If you're doing a revolution, as Princeton would define, that you're just going round on yourself. Well, no one wants to do that. So you want to obviously keep evolving in your life, and there must be some benefit within the subluxation to do that. So then I started looking at illusions, Danny, and what I came across was this definition by the Buddhists that will teach you the illusion until you're ready for the truth. And the truth is, the truth is that we are governed by indoctrinated systems. And the indoctrinated system states that the creation of a indoctrinated system is because it's the easiest way to look at something. So the easiest way to look at something when we are in situations currently like we are now is to fall back onto what we have grown up and what we have known as truth, which is it's fear-based. I've got to wash my hands. I've got to put a mask on. I'm going to catch something. I'm going to get something. And therefore we lose sight of what we are actually doing on this side. So indoctrinated systems, and indoctrinated systems are everywhere. They're in education, they're in health, they're in finances, they're in social constructs, they're in absolutely everything. So teach them the illusion until you're ready for the troll. So illusion, Sean, condition of ill. It's a condition of keeping you ill when you constantly look at an illusion.
Right.
So when we were, if I go back to that time in July 2011, when the nanny had thrown us under the bus, and we had, created this situation for ourselves, and we were in this system, this allopathic system, and I wanted to be able to educate those people who had put us into this system. So for me, it was all, my mission then was to organize the world's health information into bite-sized pieces so people could understand it. And I feel like I've done that very successfully in creating the three, what traditionally there were two health approaches, and I very successfully created this third health approach where chiropractic sits, and called it alternates. So we can pull ourselves out of this alternative bucket that everyone gets put in that's not doing drugs or medications or surgery.
Right. And all of that, a few things. When I grew up in a chiropractic household, that was not always a chiropractic household, but it was becoming one. Okay. There, you use that word trust. And when I heard later on, years later, in an educational setting, a didactic setting, the major premise, I translated that in my being to two words of trusting life. That the chiropractic was about trusting life and trusting the body. And trusting the body was something I'd already learned before chiropractic was in our household. We had heard that all the time, that the body heals itself, and that we trust the body to do its role, right? And so then we have this foundational principles and foundational values that we do our best to emanate into our practices and our practice members, to help them embrace a different way of thinking than a lot of the world has, of a fear thinking. When you see a situation like we're experiencing globally now, like the COVID situation, how do you see that through a chiropractic lens?
Great question. Again, it comes back from trust. Do we think that the germ theory is real, or are we buying into something because there's fear? I actually just did a video the other day on what's called panopticons. And I'd written an article 7 years ago on panopticons, just that, is life like the Truman Show? And it's so relevant today. You can go to the website, vital-wellbeing.com, and you can look up under the blog section and you can read it, because I read it again the other day before I did the video, and I'm like, wow, I patted myself on the back. I'm like, that's a really well-written article, because it's so relevant today. And do you know what panopticons are?
No.
So panopticons are, well, let me explain it in this way. Do you feel that your behavior is being scrutinized by something that you cannot see?
That's an interesting question. I have to give that some thought.
And most people in this climate now would say yes, because there's no one swimming at the beaches. Oh, what if they catch me? And there's no one, I'm going to make sure that I put the hand sanitizer when I go into a supermarket or whatever it is, because they're watching me. Now, there might not be anyone watching at all, but it's this belief. They call it these days the psychological inoculation. So we're hijacked in our own mind. And the more that they hijack you, the more that they can drive you by fear. So panopticons are set up in education, in health, in finance, etc. But to give you a concrete example, if you go to a prison and you see how the prisons are structured, they will have the long, concrete pillar, and they will have the guardhouse at the top. Now, this becomes like a Pavlov's dog. The inmates come out for their recreation time, and then as a result of their recreation time, the guards are out with guns. But it gets to a stage, Danny, where those guards don't even need to come out anymore. Right. That panopticon is there, and it's driven by fear. It's something that they don't see, but there's a belief that they are there,
right? Even
though they might not be. So I guess to answer that question is that life life then becomes like the Truman Show, that something is out there, something is watching us. And then we end up living to those beliefs and those fears that Zig Ziglar would say, false evidence appearing real, is not there at all.
Right.
But that's our default that we fall back on. Did that answer the question?
Yes, absolutely. It's also like the story of the elephant that, right, that there's an elephant that is attached to a string. And then when they unattach the string, they don't realize that they can go out of the circle that they're contained in.
Yeah, exactly. And the higher up the food chain you get, I guess it's like, he who controls the food, the people, and the money. He who controls the food, the health, and the money controls the people. We've seen that with Monsanto at the moment. He who controls the health, we're seeing that at the moment, and he who controls the money, well, we've always seen that in terms of following money trails or following Federal Reserves, who owns it, et cetera, et cetera. And that's around the world, not just what's happening in the States. So it's, in today's climate, we can either take a 1 meter view and go, ooh, germ theory, but the germ theory is not. The germ theory is still a theory. I think that's another panopticon indoctrinated system that is there, that's sitting over us. B.J. Palmer said, if the germ theory was alive today, there'd be no one living to debate it.
Right.
And that is true. So when we look at something like the germ theory, if we put it into application, if you have tinea on your toe, and that's said to be a fungal infection,
Mm-hmm.
and a disease of sorts, and something that is very infectious and can be caught, and your feet touch each other 200 times a night on average, then why isn't the other toe also on the other foot also creating tinea? And that's because it's not about germs. It's about systems that are imbalanced,
Right.
systems that are expressing, systems that have the ability to help change a person's life based on whatever they've created, based on their personal perceptions of their world.
Right. And so much of how people, societies, culture, businesses, politics have influenced all of our lives right now is based on not trusting life, but fearing life.
Yeah, absolutely. And like we said before, the more fear that is provided, the greater the conformity and the greater. However, I do believe that the system itself is starting to implode as more people that do sit in the vaccination lane are going, oh, actually, maybe there is merit to what these people that don't vaccinate. And I don't like the term anti-vaxxers. I'm pro-health.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not an anti-vaxxer. I'm a pro-health. I think anti-vaxxers are still looking for something to protect.
Right.
They'll go for a homeopath or something like that. But they haven't made it to the alternate, which is pro-health. So I think in that vein of what's happening around the world, I think there is an imploding happening in lots of different places, especially when I read things like the UK, and especially when we read things from outside of the country on the US, and not that I don't watch TV and I don't read newspapers. I don't do that at all, but I have certain people that I follow that I like to get information from, and feel that they're quite respectful in what they say and they do.
And an important thing on the other side of fear, towards trust, is instead of seeing limits, but seeing possibilities, seeing possibilities. So, and that's one of the things that's a part of your book, The Vital Truth, is seeing the possibilities of health.
Yeah, and also too, that in that possibility of change, I think a lot of people find change uncomfortable, and it's designed that way. It's meant to be uncomfortable, because as we're going from our history out to our mystery, it doesn't just happen like that, and that mystery is now part of our history. There's a struggle, there's a tussle that goes on, which is the same energetic that our cells have within our body. The essence of life is movement. we have to move. We have to keep movement, and that movement happens in our body at a cellular level, and it happens at a universal level. So the more that we are numbed and stagnated, like a panopticon, I'm going to freeze you so you're not going to do anything, psychological inoculation, then the more we are driven by fear, the more we sit in that fear slot. But trust is sitting alongside trust is self-responsibility. I grew up with a mother that whenever something was created in my life, back then I was probably using the words like happened to me, which is a very outside in thinking as well. But she would say, the first question that she would ask me, Danny, was always, what was your contribution?
Right.
What did you participate in?
Yes.
But it's like, it was never one-sided. You always will contribute something. And that used to drive me insane as a young kid. Like, why is it always me? Why can't I be the victim when you're young? Because that's, that's what you're raised in, but I was taught very young that you play a role. You play a role in the creation of your health. You play a role in everything. Therefore, responsibility sits alongside trust. If you're going to trust, you have to have self-responsibility. No one else is going to take care of you. The governments aren't going to take care of you. Even boards aren't going to take care of us, right? We need to make sure that we're always having a voice and speaking up and being heard.
Right. And that's something that's not necessarily a popular thing, sadly, right now.
No, and
globally.
Oh, absolutely. And those people that do speak up are getting shot, but also those people that do speak up create a following too. It's like, oh, great. Because people, and I think we shared this last time on the philosophy forum, was that people are at this point in time are looking for leadership. They're looking for strength. They're looking for, how can you be my pillar? And if someone's going to stand up and have that voice and be that pillar, then people are going to go, I'm going to follow you. Because they want that certainty in their own life if they're not getting from friends or family or those around them.
So, and one last thing I'd like to ask is, so how do we as chiropractors, say starting with our practice members, but also impact the world to have more trust in life?
How do we as chiropractors teach the world?
Help our practice members, and then also really more than our practice members, the bigger community of the world.
Well, it all starts with the self.
Right.
If people aren't willing to shed their own layers around their own fears, then the steps to trust are going to be rather slow. Because we all have those armors around us. And the more that we can peel away those armors, the more that we can trust, the more that we can read, the more that we can research, the more that we can think for ourselves, make our own decisions, reach our own conclusions, then the more we're able to step into that trust. You become more comfortable with the chaos that's going on because you know that change is afoot and you can see it. Because you don't take that 1 meter view like I've been speaking about, you take that 10,000 meter view and you go, oh, now I can see the shift and the change. Now I can feel it. Now I understand it. But it all goes back to having the courage to look at yourself and having the courage to, be vulnerable, as Brene Brown would say, have those moments where you are looking at yourself and how you're raised and what are the ingredients that will put together for your family health recipe. And the more you know about that, the more that you can become a health slider, and you can go, okay, if this is created in my life like a car accident or major trauma, then you can go to the allopathic world, because that's what they're great at doing, that real emergency care. Or maybe you want to go to the alternative. For me, we have stuck in the alternate ever since we became chiropractors. I've not been to a medical doctor since the early 1990s. All of our kids were raised at home. Were born at home, the last of which I said was breech. They've never had a medication in their life prescribed over the counter or what I call scheduled. They've never had fast food. We eat organic food. They get adjusted every Friday morning. So we live a very different life to most, but people can still have that life if they choose
Right.
to do that.
Yeah.
Be that chiropractor or be that not. Because I know that there are chiropractors out there that are struggling, and I really feel for them, and I want them to, hear this podcast to say, we can start working on trusting the process and start with education, self-education.
Yes. And your office be a reflection of trust and a place that they feel safe and they feel like I'm empowered. And rather than the chiropractor taking the power from the person, but giving it back to them, in terms of their healing. I often say that, the chiropractor, the true philosophical chiropractor really revels in being invisible in the healing process and allowing the person's body to be the hero, so to speak, of that, which is trusting.
And I've also, from the position that we have and my husband have, we've never, and this goes for our children too, we have never ever wanted to take an experience away from someone. That's not my job. That's not my role. My role is to provide exceptional care based on what we call, Dee Palmer spoke about the 3 T's, thoughts, trauma, and toxins. So our practice theme is move, eat, think. And we provide, education and resources around that move, eat, think. But never once have I ever come from the position of I want to take that experience away from you. You've created your unique health circumstances. How about I can ask you some questions in order to help you self-actualize what else might be going on in your life. So, and that's important to me because I think I shared that last time as well, that I was raised by a dad, that it was a crazy Socratic father, that, it was question after question after question. But boy, Danny, am I great at asking questions.
well, and you also are very good at answering them too. And thank you so much for being part of the Mile High podcast. I've got to tell people really, truly, if you have not picked up any of Dr. Sara's books, please do. The Vital Truth, The Health Illusion. We're talking about truths and illusions. There's a lot of illusions going along in the world right now. And anchoring into some truth is a vital thing, and you helping your practice members navigate that is vital too, so they can come to new conclusions rather than necessarily the narrative that we're all being fed. So, and how can people pick those up, by the way?
You can go to the website, so vital dash, not an underscore, but a dash wellbeing.com, and go to the shop on the website, or Amazon has them depending on where people are watching from around the world. I know the Vital Truth is sold in over 34 countries, and the Health Illusion is fast up there now too. So books that I'm really proud of and that have really helped a lot of chiropractors in practice. So probably the website, Amazon, either one.
Good.
But also too, Danny, I just wanted to say on the website, everything that I write has a neurological perspective to it, everything. So if people are, if there's a practice member that's challenged with something in their health or in their life, then refer them to the website and they can read one of our blog posts. It's full of great information from a very alternate, very clear, very neurological perspective.
Excellent. And how do people connect with you more?
Off the website. So you could send me an email at hello@vital-wellbeing.com.
Good. Well, again, thank you so much for being part of the Mile High podcast. And make sure if you've enjoyed these episodes that we put out, to hit subscribe. And we look forward to seeing everyone on Higher Ground in August 20th to 23rd, 2020, milehigh2020.com. Easy to remember. And we look forward to seeing you there. Thank you again, Sara, for being part of the Philosophy Summit and sharing today.
Thank you so much, Danny. I'm just blessed to be able to speak with people like yourself and share, and hopefully that's inspired some chiropractors to do their life differently. And we're all really fortunate to be able to serve people with chiropractic. It's really incredible calling and ride to be on.